like to welcome you to our first regular monthly meeting of January 8th of 2024. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mr. Sneed.
Here.
Mr. Lupott.
Here.
Mr. Vogel.
Here.
Mr. Laughlin.
Here.
Mrs. Fosbaugh. Here. Chief McDonough.
Here.
Mr. Furman.
Here.
Mr. Bonity.
Here.
And I'd also like to note for the record that planning consultant Carolyn Yeagle is also present at the meeting.
Okay, two or more members of the Board of Supervisors were together for the following occasions, which were executive sessions, informal meetings, and township-related events. Monday, December the 11th of 2023, after the regular meeting to discuss personal issues. Tuesday, December the 12th, 2023, possibly during the employee Christmas luncheon. Saturday, December the 16th, 2023, possibly during the Broughton Volunteer Fire Department annual Christmas dinner. Tuesday, January 2nd, 2004, prior to the reorganization meeting to discuss personal matters. Thursday, January 4th, 2024, workshop session and personal matters. Monday, January the 8th, prior to the regular meeting to discuss issues of safety. Please be informed that the Township of South Park records all public meetings as part of the meeting minute process. Anyone speaking this evening is requested not to repeat the same points addressed at a prior meeting. Residents are reminded that the Board of Supervisors is regulated to adhere to existing ordinances. Before addressing the PRD, we ask if anybody has anything to offer other than the PRD that we're going to be going through tonight, and we have our planner here today for it. The audience agenda was placed online for residents who may wish to offer public comment or ask a question, which will be entered into the record at the meeting this evening. Comments and questions were to be submitted no later than 4:30 p.m. Monday, January the 8th of 2024.
Mr. Chairman, there were no questions or emails or comments to submit into the record this evening.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, to the sessions when two or more supervisors were together, January 2nd to following the reorganization meeting, and congratulations of Lawrence Vogel being sworn together. We were
Great.
together for that.
Thank you. Okay, call on the people on this side. Anybody? Come on up, sir. Would you sign in there too, please?
Tim Foster, 1046 Westchester. I had a question about the ordinance 715. I was hoping you guys may be able to shed some light, because I was asked this a number of different times. Was there any public forum where this was discussed? Were there previous versions of this? It seems like the Planning and Zoning Board didn't really discuss this. Like, you would normally kind of create something, there would be discussion, there would be maybe some experts speaking, there would be members of the public offering some insights, asking questions. I think that's what kind of gives the public confidence that, you know, they're kind of involved in this process and it is an open forum. I've never had to explain the Sunshine Law Act to, you know, so many people in the last week or so. So, I mean, are you able to shed any light, like when was this discussed by Planning and Zoning and or this board?
Sure, we have an agenda here that our planner is here tonight, that she'll be answering any of your questions and comments. So what the reason was why I brought it up just now is anybody wants to bring anything up other than that PRD right now. Does anybody here on the right-hand side? Anything different? Anybody on the left-hand side? Come on up. Just have a seat, sir, and we'll address that question to you.
Okay, I mean, are there gonna be
Yes, she has the agenda there.
Yes,
also?
It's all outlined, yes.
All under number 7.
Right,
Yes.
all in number 7.
yes.
Come on up.
Julia Gunn, 1840 Stoltz Road.
Okay.
I just have a couple questions about the upcoming elementary school and the traffic that's going to be impacting South Park. Has there been any plans to discuss with either the state, because the state road, Bethel Park, because they are part of the property, South Park's part of the road? Are there any plans on even educating the public about the bikers, the hikers, the horseback riders on that road? And that, 2024 is when they're expecting to open. So, has anybody thought about any issues?
We don't discuss any of the school.
Sorry, I have a quick question.
Yes.
You're referring to the addition to the elementary school? or-
No, they're building a new whole elementary complex. It's 5 elementary schools, all going on King School Road in 2024.
You know what, you're
That's
talking about
Bethel
Bethel
Park.
Park. This is
Right,
South
but
Park.
that traffic will be coming on Stoltz Road.
No, we have had no discussion with Bethel
No.
Park.
Okay, I've discussed with Bethel
Yes.
Park. There'll be up to 50 to 60 buses,
Mhm.
over 100 teachers, and countless, parents driving to school. And they're all gonna either come down Stoltz or come up Berryman to Stoltz to King School. So, I just think we ought to be a little bit prepared for it before it happens. So, because that's a lot of extra vehicular traffic when there are no sidewalks, no walkways. You can't walk around across the bridge at Sleepy Hollow and Stoltz without walking on the road. So I think there's a lot of safety concerns that'll be coming up in the future. So instead of reacting after it happens, I thought maybe we could think about it before it happens.
Well, did you have any discussion with Bethel Park as to your concerns
Yes, I have.
and their response?
Well, he agreed to some education for the public.
And who is that, the superintendent?
I have his name at home. He's the assistant principal over there. And I met him over at the property to talk about a couple of different things. But I think, it's a road that goes right around the county park.
Mhm.
There's no walkways. There's no nothing for people to walk on, bike on, ride on. I asked you a couple of years ago about putting up, horseback mounted rider signs on the roads. And you told me, of course, it was some kind of regulation. It's a sign that you would be legally liable for, the sign.
Right, but we also mentioned that you could place that on your own property.
No,
Yeah, we did have a discussion on that, Julie. I remember being on your
Okay.
property, because that's what I discussed with our
but how far
solicitor.
off the property?
That I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's the
You
other
had not
question.
indicated that you were going to move ahead with that, so.
Okay.
In fact, I think I discussed that at some point. It was a while ago with
Yeah,
Mr.
it was
Furman.
one, Gary.
Yeah, I have the letter with, I'll look at that further,
Okay.
but just to bring it to your attention, because there's going to be much more traffic coming down there. There's already a lot of traffic coming from Summit Station that direction. And I also wanted to thank the police and the public, because we've noticed that the drivers are a little bit more respectful. I think since the publicity we had last year,
Mhm.
people are more aware of hikers, bikers, walkers on that road. So thank you, because the police have been sitting around it for a while. So that was my comment for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we have Carolyn Yeager here, our planner, who is going to address PRD and the steps of what we've taken place before. So Carolyn?
And Mr. Steve, can I just add, just for the public, this is going to be clear, Carolyn Yeagle is going to give a presentation regarding the ordinance that's on the agenda tonight. And then if members of the public have any comments or questions, or need another opportunity to speak about it. Is that correct?
That's
Yes, that's correct.
So the idea is hopefully with her question, her original presentation may answer some of the questions and concerns.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? All right. Thank you. As a follow-up to discussions throughout 2023, we're here as part of an agenda. And the segment of this PRD amendment is born from the authorization that the board gave at its September 2023 meeting to prepare and advertise a PRD-related amendment, and then that is where we set this work in play. In terms of the work that was completed then as part of the second half of September, a draft was put together and then put out for public review. At that time, since it had come from the board as the group that was authorizing the preparation of this, it was sent to the Planning Commission for their review. And it was also sent out to the county and then published for public review. And here at the Township building, people came in to take a look at it and review it. So following the beginning then of October, as people were starting to review that, there was additional discussion at the October 9th board meeting, specifically as related to some of the streets discussion. So there was a motion associated with that streets discussion at the October board meeting. Following that board meeting in October, the regularly held Planning Commission meeting, October 25th, was the event where the Planning Commission had the opportunity as part of its full public forum to be able to discuss and determine if it was going to move forward with a recommendation or otherwise comments on the ordinance draft that they had been given the weeks prior. And they did do that at the October 25th meeting to give it the recommendation for the board as the board was then scheduled for its November public hearing. So as part of the November public hearing, there were a number of comments that were received, and it was our task then to take those comments and things that had been given as feedback throughout the process of in 2023 as it relates to PRD, to look at the evaluation of the comments as well as then considerations for the kinds of development that has happened in recent years associated with things here in South Park. And so the consideration for things out of that evaluation was specific to thinking about how could we then prepare some things for the potential enactment of this ordinance. So that document was prepared following the November public hearing, again following that assessment, and then it was advertised for the enactment. And I think one important element of this is that the advertisements that occurred in the fall follow the municipality's planning code, and then the advertisement as it occurs as part of the enactment process also follow the municipality's planning code, specifically 610B, and that was part of the advertisement that was made in the last couple of weeks. So I think that is starting off with some of the timeline considerations throughout the last series of months that we've had. The second part is, and if I may ask, does everyone have a copy of the agenda? There is a piece of paper on the back side of that agenda, correct? That is also a duplicate of the information here on the board. So if you don't have an agenda, you're welcome to look at this board, which is, again, visiting the points that were at the high level presented as part of the public hearing process. And there were, it's not, I'm sorry? It's a packet. It's a packet? Yes. Thank you. Okay. I appreciate you clarifying that. All right. Thank you. So this paper has the summary in looking at the different articles where the amendments are incorporated. These again are in the same context of what was presented at the public hearing for the various topics. And just to run down through those, there are a series of articles. The first one is a set of definitions. Two of the definitions that are proposed as part of this amendment are amendments to existing definitions. And then the second part of the definition is actually to have a new definition introduced for local street, because that is not the type of street that is defined presently. And then in sort of a companion piece to that, the amendment to the Collector Street listing. So presently, there are quite a number of streets within the Collector Street definition, and this is clearly identifying an amendment so that these are all streets that are otherwise owned by someone else besides the Township of South Park, and it gives a listing and their classifications to that. The second component, in terms of letter B, that is introduced as part of this amendment is actually to remove PRD permissions associated with having PRDs in R1. So that's within one of the articles that is specifically to R1, the text associated with the use and the references to Article 18. The third area of amendment included within this document is looking at R2 and its reinsertion because there are PRDs presently in R2 within the Township of South Park. And I will get to a couple of points associated with the specifics of Article 18 that are companions to this reinsertion. And I'll get there in a moment. The fourth item, which is also looking again at where PRDs are permitted, is actually in deleting PRDs from the R4. So the context of things that were looked at as to where these are areas are on the map, the nature of them being built out, etc., is something that was considered. And then the major focus, as has been introduced as part of the September-October public review draft, again, the ones that the board looked at, ones that the Planning Commission looked at, and that were subject to the hearing in November that the board conducted, really focus on this fifth element as part of the E heading. And there are a couple of things here. The first one is the minimum acreages that are identified for what would otherwise be required for R2 and R3. Again, because there is deleting out R1 and R4, we needed to remove the references to those acreages and otherwise the provisions associated with it. A component of this Article 18 a related amendment is that it is clarifying that there are PRD permissions in R2 and R3 so long as the access is from an arterial and or collector street. So with the definition updates, this is something again that is a clarification and a companion piece because in the analysis completed as part of September, as part of October Planning Commission and board discussion, as well as then at the hearing in November, there was really the evaluation of where are the arterial collector streets, who owns those, where are the capacities for those, and specifically this is identifying that PRDs in R2 or R3 are not permissible to be accessed from local streets, which again, we identify those local streets as ones that are having their own new definition, and then again the distinction of arterial and collector as streets owned by others besides the Township of South Park, and those again are listed. The next component to this is in Article 18, it's specifically calling out that there are only single-family detached dwellings in R2. Now, there's an important element to, if you're looking at the list, whether it's up on the board or what's in your hand, is that there is the removal of the retirement community PRD. And I think that is important to recognize here because there are quite a number of provisions within the existing PRD ordinance and an set of evaluations that was completed as earlier in the year of 2023 as to what those densities would actually permit and the nature of those land uses that are otherwise permissible within other districts. So the consideration for R2 having its land use specifically be only single family detached is an element of this amendment. When we go to the consideration of what was done again in the authorization in September, the Planning Commission review and the board review in October, as well as the public hearing in November, we are really looking then at an important clarification that this amendment introduces, and that is that there are now dimensional requirements associated with minimum lot sizes, lot widths, coverages, yards, and that heights, because though not all of those criteria are defined or identified within the current PRD ordinance for any district. So now that we have 2 districts called out and we are looking at what those minimum lot sizes are, that is again an important element that sort of carried through September, October, November, and where we are here as part of this meeting. So I'd offer that out as an item as in this amendment. And then lastly, as an element of sort of tying this together and all the kinds of cleanup types of things that happen as part of any amendment, there are quite a number of provisions within the existing PRD ordinance that refer to retirement community PRDs. There are R1 areas and R4 areas. So there are a number of deletions there associated with that set. So I think in looking at sort of a high level as to what the 5 areas of the ordinance that are addressed as part of what has come out from this fall 2023, winter 2023 process, I just wanted to identify that as this moved forward and from the public hearing, those points have all been incorporated into this and would identify if there are any questions that we can get to those. Thank you.
Any questions? Tim?
Yeah, did you say there was a?
Could you come up here and identify your name, please, and write?
Sorry, first time. Hi, my name is Carrie DeZola. I'm at 6805 Hilldale Drive. You mentioned something about the removal of a specific type of development, I think senior living.
Retirement community PRD is what's called out in the ordinance today. And that has been something that as part of the PRD discussions throughout 2023, when the analysis was done as looking at really what the densities are permissible with that type of thing, the series of various land uses that are outlined as possibilities, right, for someone to pursue, and then ultimately where these lands are falling, that there are other districts within the township where those residential and non-residential, I'll focus for a second, those non-residential land uses are otherwise permissible. So there is nothing within this amendment that is having a definition or, let me make sure. Someone can come in and propose a PRD so long as it fulfills these criteria, and it can be open to anyone. So the way in which that had previously been drafted years and years ago, and the way that really some of these are working now, it wasn't necessarily a forward-moving kind of thing. So really stemming from that density analysis early on, it was thought this can change and be deleted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Carol, just because that was part of the ordinance at the public hearing in November.
Yes, everything that I've identified has been part of that, yes.
Right, so from the public hearing, there was a public hearing, there were people here that talked about the ordinance. What you're describing are things that were there, there's only been a couple of minor changes since then.
That is right, yes, and those were also part of what Planning Commission discussed at their October meeting. Mm-hmm.
Good evening. Raymond Steinhauser, 1555 Berryman Avenue. You said a lot, so I just want to go back to one thing. You named collector streets in the document. Is that a complete list of all of the collector streets?
Yes.
Okay, because I live on Berryman, that's a state road.
So we have the existing definition of collector streets. I'm gonna read that one first, when you're ready.
Absolutely, please continue.
Okay.
Thank you.
The existing definition of collector street is a public street which, in addition to giving access to abutting lots, intercepts local streets and provides a route for carrying considerable volumes of local traffic to community facilities and arterial roads. Streets classified as collector roads in the township for the purposes of interpreting this chapter
Okay. So
are, Brownsville Road Extension, Corrigan Drive, East Park Drive, McElhaney Road, Piney Fork Road, Ridge Road, Riggs Road, Sleepy Hollow Road, Snowden Road, Stewart Road, Stoltz Road, Wallace Road, and Wilson Road. So that's existing. And then I'll read the proposed. Okay. So,
Is the proposed in the document?
the proposed is in the,
I did not see that, so.
Yeah, what's on here is not what you read.
Right. what
right,
you
I
have
am reading from I read
From
first
the
the
old.
existing.
Okay,
This exists today.
okay, this is new.
Yes. I'm sorry, sir, I don't know.
They have the new ordinance, Ms. Shaver.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's what they're looking at. So what you
Yes.
read was the prior, the old
Well,
ordinance.
my ultimate question is, so you're saying that you cannot, like, you cannot access a collector road via a state road with the being an old, what was it?
No. What this amendment does is it identifies that a PRD is permissible in R2, R3 only if that PRD is accessed from a collector street or arterial street as defined by this ordinance.
Okay, correct.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what, so it's a PRD. So then you're saying if that PRD touches a road owned by South Polk, it cannot function that way. It has to touch a collector street.
Or arterial, that is correct.
Okay,
Yes, and then for the purpose of this ordinance, the collector streets are called out here. Berryman is not one of the ones that's in this collector street listing. So,
okay.
yes.
That's, only as I'm asking this, because I'm sure a lot of people, like myself, are looking at the Sleepy Hollow one.
Okay,
And
that's a change.
I see the head nodding, I'm just,
Yeah, I know, we thought that would be, we wanted to clarify that this evening
So-
as well.
as the young lady said before, it may not be right, I just have to ask the question.
No, that's fine.
Yeah,
So-
and that is a change, right, that was introduced as part of the fall draft and
Okay.
remains as so.
Okay,
Yes,
that's what I'm looking for. Thank
okay,
you.
thank you.
I have a question. My name is Ben Gray, 3619 Downing Street. So, my understanding was in the fall when we were talking about PRD and R2 was that it was being removed from R2. So I'm just trying to find out what the thought process was to amending this at all to keep it
Mhm.
in R2.
So, the R2 was actually removed as part of the springtime 2023 public hearing process. And then in September, that authorization to look back at everything that had been sort of discussed up to that point in 2023 was sort of on the table, right? And so the analysis that was completed as part of each of the districts, R1, R2, R3, R4, right? The consideration was actually, it should have a recommendation and a consideration for the amendment to remove them from R1 and R4, right? R3 as it is, and then to reinsert it as R2. So when looking at the pattern of the existing zoning map, and specifically the consideration for these roads of collector and arterial. And then secondly, so that was a specific distinction, right, that was beyond the districts. It was like, where are there capacities potentially on the road network for this kind of volume to exist? So it was, that was a consideration. Where those districts are, or what districts are along those roads that still have land potentially available for development, if there is going to be any additional consideration for, residential development, and the options for that were considered. The third part of it is actually, I think, almost, I put that up equally important as the existing ordinance does not have dimensional criteria associated with minimum lot sizes, the coverage, the setbacks, all those kinds of things. So the other part of the evaluation was, if we're going to remove it from some districts and we're going to have a reconsideration of what has happened in R2 and what could happen in R2, it was very important to think about that dimensions for each of these lots was considered.
So, I'm sorry, I don't want to, so you're saying that the section that is covered in this packet in O and P that has dimensions, that was not in the original ordinance? I thought that was in the original ordinance, that there was, in fact, larger, I thought the minimum square footage for front and rear yard in the old ordinance was 5 feet bigger.
This is the existing ordinance,
Okay,
and there are no minimums dimensional requirements in this ordinance.
okay. There's
And
nothing listed in there as far as any square footage for front or backyards in that document.
no,
And that document
for
is only,
PRD,
that document is only available in, like, can I access that online?
I have.
Our ordinances are not available online, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'd have to come in here and look through that if I wanted to look through the ordinances, is that correct?
Well, we could email a portion of it to
You can
you.
email a portion of it?
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, so then the other.
If I can, sorry, are you referring to the ordinance that was at the public hearing in November? Is that, and that's what change you're talking about?
No, I'm referring to section O and P of this document where I had seen online, I was not here for any meeting, that had larger square footage for this, I think. I might be misremembering that, but I'm almost positive there was a change in O and P for R2 and R3 for these.
As part of the proposal from, yes, in the November public hearing series, if that's what you're referring to, and pardon, by old, I thought you meant by this.
I don't know, honestly. I just remember seeing different things that were listed compared to what is on this document.
Correct, and that was the reference I was making in terms of what we were charged to consider as part of what had been heard as part of the review process this fall. And so the consideration for what was heard, and again, the evaluation of things like in the TOD and what has been developed, and also consideration for trying to minimize the nonconformities that would exist with anything that has otherwise been developed to date for PRDs in those districts.
My other question is kind of these collector roads, so Stewart Road is listed, so you could build a PRD on Stewart Road.
On the state portion of the road.
What part of it is state portion, what part of it is considerable? I guess my question is you're talking about a road that connects to Brownsville Road with not a very good intersection there. And you're talking about possibly, if a PRD was put in, you're talking about increasing traffic on a intersection that is right now poor. Is there any consideration to where these are going? I guess I'm questioning a little bit. Originally, when the Sleepy Hollow stuff was going on, there was talk about removing the PRD entirely from R2, and now we're talking about amending the ordinance to increase it, and I'm wondering why.
I'm sorry, increase it in what way?
Well, like keeping it in R2. I'm just wondering why why we're even discussing. I thought we were taking it out entirely, and now we're just going to amend it.
I think that there are a couple of facets to the consideration for R2. And the one One is, yes, the district. The second is dimensional requirements. The third is the roads in which are adjacent to lands that may be in those two. And then this fourth one is that this PRD amendment is proposing that only single-family detached dwellings would be dwelling types that would be permissible within the R2. And I think that is something that was heard in public meetings and hearings in which I've participated, is something where the consideration for land use types was of utmost importance. So with the amendment proposed here of being specifically to single-family detached dwellings and its compatibility with what is otherwise permissible within the base district of R2, primarily being single-family detached, there is a level of compatibility that this amendment seeks to really have as consistent, because the ordinance as it exists today with what is permissible with as land use types in R2 was much greater, and that is in part why that amendment earlier at 7/12 happened in the first part of the year, because that set of things, again, this is having a couple of layers, and I hope that that's something you're considering as part of this amendment as well, not just the district, but the fact that the land use specifically to single-family detached dwellings is a consideration for that, and that's why it's part of the consideration.
Okay, so I don't know how familiar you are with the Summit Station development.
I am, as part of the TOD.
So in this amendment, you have a road that connects from the Summit Station directly onto Brownsville Road. So that would meet the criteria for going directly onto a collector road, correct?
The Summit Station was done with
Right,
the base district of BP and an overlay, so,
Well, I mean, so I'm just talking like hypothetical here. So you have a planned residential district is what Summit Station would qualify as, correct?
no.
No.
It is a transit-oriented development as part of that overlay. It is very different
It's
than the
transient
PRD.
because it's next to the train station?
Correct, it has that station as well as then the
Okay.
trail corridor connecting in with the
Okay.
station. So it's done as a completely different process that was having an amendment from several years ago. And the land uses associated with the TOD are very different than what's being considered here as an amendment for the PRD.
Okay, so my question though is, so that development connects directly to Brownsville Road. In this amendment, that would be good, you're connecting to a collector road. However, that development also comes out onto Wood Street. And bypass, like, that is not a collector road, that is a township road. So if one of these developments went in and had a similar setup, where they wanted to have they wanted a main corridor route out onto Stewart Road, Brownsville Road, but then they put in another street that went off onto a township road, would that be approved?
No, because the criteria is that it must be accessed from a collector and or arterial.
Okay. So if they were to request that, like, hey, we've got one that comes out onto Brownsville Road, but we are also going to put in a road onto some other street,
Your
the
second,
township would not approve that.
your second scenario wouldn't fit the criteria. The township would have to consider that it wouldn't fit that criteria.
Okay. All right.
If you're specifically talking local,
Yes.
yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
My name is Paul Smith. I live on Old Post Road. Number 9. I just want to, again, these are clarification questions, and I apologize if they may be different. I'd also like to thank the township manager for making sure I had a copy of this material and discussing a couple of major points with me this afternoon. It's very useful. I thank you very much. I guess, I understand the comments that have been made pretty much. I just have a couple of questions, I guess. One is to make sure I understand, again, this dimensional issue. I live in an R1. When my neighbor built his current house, there were side set-asides and all the things that are mentioned here as far as, you know, setbacks and minimum yard size and stuff like that. But yet there weren't ones for R2s or R3s.
Can I ask a question? Do you live in a PRD presently? This specifically is looking at the PRD requirements. And so R1,
So for R2 then, existing R2 single families, there are these same similar setbacks.
in the base district requirements of R2, if someone's coming in just to do a standard development and not have any PRD process or application, they would follow the dimensional criteria that is within the township's ordinance for R1. Yes, and R2 or R3. Each of those base zoning districts have criteria.
Okay, and so these new ones for the RD possible, are these then new for all the lots in an R2?
No, they're specifically if the development were proposed as a PRD.
Okay,
So the base district requirements, the dimensional requirements for each of the R2 and R3 have not changed.
right. And
Or-
so the summary of these provisions then mean that the units going into that situation would be single-family units with these, I take smaller requirements as far as minimum lot size, setbacks and things of that nature.
That is correct, because there is also a difference from the base requirements, there's open space. So that's required. So the balance of that is what is considered.
And so is the open space omitted then for these more clustered
Omitted or
or not put in at all?
it's
You said
already
there
in
was
the
open space.
it's already in the ordinance, and that portion of the ordinance is not changing. It's part of this book.
Okay, so is that part of, again, is that part of my R1 requirements as far as the amount of open space in my development?
In your development, I believe if it's been, its previous application and as it got constructed, went through a R1 base zoning district requirement, set of requirements, excuse me. There are no open space requirements for R1 base zoning district. We are making the recommendation as part of this process and what has been part of the review that PRDs would get, they're currently allowed to happen in R1, and we are,
No, I understand all that,
taking
and
it
that's
out.
very positive from all of our perspectives, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But again, these are gonna be exceptional PRDs and R2s or R3s anyway, under the criteria you put forward here and the conditions of single-family housing and road access, which were all good, positive improvements, to some degree. Although again, with other comments, I'm not quite sure what compelled the board to feel like it had to reinsert R2s into the access roads, if you will, the collective roads and the arterial roads. What consideration compelled that? Because again, we took them all out. And obviously they knew that there was an impact in doing that. And so, why be put in? But let me first just clarify this. So these requirements here for the R2 district, PRD, in where they are now permitted in a limited area, those are new criteria,
Yes.
and they may be, are they more restrictive than those in an R2 single-family housing unit developed by somebody building 2 or 3 lots?
Are they more restrictive in their,
In their sizes, setbacks?
they are different in terms of the lot sizes. In a PRD, you also would be required to put open space within that proposal. That is not required in the base district R2. So I don't want to confuse the word restrictive, I'm just trying to think about how you're asking that.
Well, in other words, these lots are going to be closer together than they are in a traditional R2 now in the
They would possibly, if there are minimums. If an applicant wanted to use those minimums, they can. If they wanted to make them larger, they can.
But these developments are still required to have at least some provision for open space.
Yes,
And open space, is that defined in any particular way?
yes, we can pull things out. It's in the ordinance, yes.
So it could just be a lawn.
No,
Has to be something more naturalistic than that, or what?
open space, an area of land or water on a development site in which no structures are permitted and which is set aside for the use and enjoyment of the general public or the owners and tenants of the property which adjoins the open space.
So it doesn't really require it to be a natural setting, so to speak.
No,
Trees or,
no.
okay, all right.
There are other things within the ordinance as net buildable area
Right, I understand.
that would need to be considered as part of that assessment.
Right, okay. Okay, now I guess we're back to the other question, which I think I just lost my mind here on, which we talked about in regards to this. Pardon? Somebody said something.
He said why the change?
Why did
Oh,
it-
yeah, what compelled us to put these PRDs back into this limited number of locations in this document?
So, the earlier discussion with R2 and its removal was born from not just the district, it was born from the densities that were permitted within that district. It was born from the range of land uses that were permitted in that district. It was also born from consideration even of the retirement community PRD, which was even more significant than in its potential impact than the sort of baseline, I'll call it, PRD. So the consideration for what was heard in earlier parts of 2023, as well as then what Planning Commission considered this fall, what was identified as part of the board meetings and the public hearing, said public hearings in these two items, was that single-family detached dwellings was something that we heard sort of as an important element to what is happening presently and the majority of what is happening in R2 today. So from a perspective of, is it the PRD that at its root was really the most, the biggest thing to address? Or was it the combination of things such as the uses, the densities, all of the things that came along with those discussions in 2023? So with the consideration for the single-family detached dwelling as the only land use that's permissible within R2, the consideration for introducing minimum lot sizes that are a percentage of what the R2 district presently allows, and then thirdly, this combination of recognizing, I think again from earlier discussions, that the impacts or potential impacts of traffic within neighborhoods was something to consider, made that third move to on what streets would these be accessed. So the refinement for what was collector and what was arterial, and the call out specifically as a criteria that it introduced PRD as for arterial and collector. Made that I'm going to say a whole view picture as to trying to balance out all of the comments that were.
So for these limited areas, should they be developed in this way, the way perceived here as the amendment will be? The planning professionals here are confident that that will meet the load restrictions and safety restrictions and things like that in those neighborhoods also.
As the presence of being on arterials and collectors, that is important. There are still criteria for traffic impact that needs to be done as any part of any application and are subject to review. Secondly, with the aspect of these streets being something that are not on the township's list, but are county or state or in one case federal, there's, you know, the element of, there's review by others, right, in terms of some of the access associated with, or the potential for this, because again,
So
of the
you're
process.
saying one consideration is that this is not solely, on these locations, it's not solely this township's control.
That is correct, there is feedback from others. And then any, as it is in Pennsylvania, and the solicitor can identify that a developer is responsible for the impacts associated with the streets in which it touches. So there would have to be coordination. So any kinds of things that would be done related to volumes or densities and that sort of matchup would need to be addressed.
Okay.
Yes?
I understand it would need to be addressed. We saw that in this past year's commissions and whatnot, discussions. But again, you decided that I'm gonna make an assumption here that these lot sizes allow, you know, in this particular property, 30 units. And then they've done a traffic analysis to see if that will really create a problem on the connector road.
We have not looked at specific applications, I mean, in terms of this, I think in terms of
I
the
just mean
scaling
looking
of
at
it.
a known open lot, buildable lot size that might fit this exception criteria. You haven't designed these lot size standards with a load factor in mind.
No, there are the ITE criteria for that. I think the lot size standards are, again, also back to the element that PRDs require open space. And so in order for that open space to be something where that can be achieved, the balance of what can be done with lot sizes was a consideration.
Okay. Could I ask a question about section J, I guess it is? Where you talk about the minimum site required for all planned PRDs, and R2 and 3 shall be 10 acres. And then there's this paragraph, including deletion of the statements in the R1 district about 30, and the R3 and R4 districts. What exactly is being changed here? Is all the included language being deleted somewhere?
There are statements, the statements in the parentheses exist within the current ordinance. We need to remove them in one because R1 and R4 are being removed as permissible places where PRDs can happen. So we need to delete those statements, and that's just identifying within this amendment that that action
So
needs
actually,
to
it's
occur.
a neutral action, really, based on the.
That is correct, yes. And then the element of the R3 that's in the second parenthetical statement is because we have included that in the statement above it in terms of the minimum lot size. And those lot sizes were evaluated in context of the areas that exist within the township.
Okay, thank you for your patience.
I appreciate you asking the questions.
Whatever, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just had a couple of quick follow-ups. Tim Foster. Carolyn, you know, thank you for your work. As an outside consultant, you kept using the phrase, consideration was given. Can you describe that a little more detail, like the issues that came up, consideration was given, who was a part of that consideration?
It's a couple of different things depending upon where we were in the process in 2023. So I think that there were some public hearings on different topics associated with proposals and PRDs and all those kinds of things throughout 2023, where I was attending those hearings. I've reviewed the minutes of those hearings, as well as I attend the Planning Commission meetings monthly, and there are things that are discussed as part of those Planning Commission meeting agendas, right, for applications that come in, whether it is a PRD or it's in another district, right, and sort of the development for that. I think the second part, throughout the work in 2023, these various discussions, and then prior, you know, as part of, I should say, the authorization that the board had based on its September discussion, it was really looking at this PRD chapter as a whole. So the considerations were from what the public comments had been on different topics within 2023, It had been from what the Planning Commission had had at its various meetings, board meetings in 2023, as well as then the staff has been going through records, long ago records, and trying to understand what has been the pattern of what's come in the door, what has over the years gone through the process, what has not gone through the process, and why. So I think it is not just an instance, if I may say, from the specific events, in terms of the ones I named, through September, October, November, and then our work up to this point. But there have been quite a number of things in this year and in other years. As I've been in this position for quite a bit of time, so I've also been able to reflect on that and bring that to the boards and the planning commissions and the publics.
Was there any discussion at any of the public meetings or from either members of the public or the planning group? Like, if we look at the R2 regulations under, I think it's .0, I mean, the 8,500 square feet, I mean, are you saying that consideration came from public hearings or public comments, or where did all those specific things come from?
The O and P were points from this fall's discussion, and then at the public hearing in November, and then evaluation of other things. Again, I mentioned the Todd.
And just to clarify, so you're saying like all these numbers were discussed at meetings about maximum stories, the yard size, all of that?
They're mentioned, the element of how open space related in the percentage that were required.
I just mean like the specific number, like 8,500 square feet requirement. I mean, was there discussion, did somebody say, I think it should be 10,000, I think it should be 6, I think it should be 8,500. Where did that discussion happen? You're saying your consideration was not done kind of behind closed doors.
No.
It was done, where was that? I mean, I don't know if I've missed some meetings or something, but where was like those numbers discussed, right? Because that, normal people would get together and say, what should it be? 12, 10, 6?
The elements of O and P as amendment from the public hearing November session were done based on items that were introduced as part of the public hearing discussion, and then the evaluation of what was done in other places in terms of the Todd, and actually when we look at what the minimum lot size is, because please remember that there are no dimensional requirements within the existing PRD. So in looking at what has been constructed over time, and an effort to try and minimize the number of non-conforming lots that these criteria would entail, we considered that.
So you're saying it's a matter of record, if I would go back and look at the November notes for that meeting, I would see discussions of these various numbers?
In terms of
Yeah, that's all I'm asking,
concern,
like, where did the 8,500, who decided that, where did that come from? And I think you said it was a part of the November
it
meeting
was
somewhere.
born from the comments in November as to,
Okay.
and I believe, if I may also say, that there were comments given at the planning, it was before the public hearing, they were given at the planning commission meeting in October.
Okay.
So there was information submitted as part of
No,
those discussions.
I guess a question that a lot of people would have, if we just take the Sleepy Hollow, for instance, because that's been under consideration for a while, how do these numbers change? Like if I had X amount of single-family homes that I could have built under the old R2 laws or regulations, how would this impact? Would I be able to build more single-family homes under that R2 in like a Sleepy Hollow type of development? Less or equal amount?
I'm pausing because I really want to make sure I understand your question in context of nothing within this proposed amendment would permit a PRD on Sleepy Hollow Road. So I don't want to start looking at an apple and orange, and so I really wanna make sure. Could
Yeah,
you
I'm
please
sorry.
ask me again?
I just said a Sleepy Hollow type development, so a development somewhere else. I don't wanna use any other names, I don't know what, you know, public information, but if, a development within South Park, how did this change as far as I have, you know, X amount of acres, am I able to put more single-family homes in here because of this change? Less or equal amount? What were the R2 requirements versus what are the PRD R2 requirements?
If you put that one, which that's the after, that's the, let's go back. That's the before, so they drop it by 1,500 square feet.
Okay, so is there any,
I'm trying to answer your question, go ahead.
no, I mean, so he just showed me this, cause I don't think it's in our document, but, so there's obviously more homes that could be built in an R2 district within the PRD than could normally be built in an R2. Cause the lot sizes obviously go from 10,000 to 8,500.
But there is open space that is required in a PRD, and there is no open space, common open space required in a base district R2 plan. So respectfully, without consideration for what the gross acreage is, and then what needs to be subtracted off for that net buildable area in terms of where things can be placed, I'm not certain I'm going to be able to give you a yes, no, specifically because it very much depends upon the land, topography, locations of streams, things of that nature. The second part of it, and I don't want to sound to repeat, but I'm trying to think about the way in which open space does relate to an R2 PRD, but it does not relate to a base district R2. That's a very different distinction. And so
I guess just to simplify, so if a development was in an R2 zone before, and when we think about the number of homes that could be built on however many acre size property, this seems like it would increase the number of homes that will be built. Is there any analysis on that you've done? Does the green space kind of equal out the shrinkage of the 10,000 to 8,500 square feet?
it does in context of, yes, we're only dealing now with single-family detached dwellings. And in previous 2023 discussions where R2 PRD was a topic, there were many more land use types that also had no minimum lot sizes, setbacks, or any of that dimensional criteria associated with them. So the consideration, and as part of both the Planning Commission meeting in October and the public hearing discussion in November, that this consideration for what that impact of open space in a PRD was really doing to try and get an equal footing, right, was a subject in both sessions.
Okay, and the board is comfortable, the supervisor comfortable with the level of input and that they've had in this process?
Yes.
Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions.
And I just like to use my property as an example so I can kind of get on the same page with everybody. So I have 10 acres, okay? And it borders Stoltz Road.
Mm-hmm.
So someone would be able to build a PRD on the 10 acres of single-family homes.
And I'm just asking this question in general, is all of where Stoltz Road is state-owned, or is any portion?
It's state-owned.
The whole of? So, if you were an applicant for the land on which you were talking about, came in with a PRD for, and you're R2?
Mm-hmm.
single-family detached dwellings only.
Oh, okay.
That is correct. That
So-
is different than what has been part of past discussions in PRD.
Okay, so no townhouses, no nothing could be?
No,
in
ma'am.
there. Okay. Now, the other question I had, if you look, 8,500 square feet is 0.19 acres. Why not a quarter acre?
In terms of, again, the evaluation that was done based upon the comments that were received at the planning commission and the
Okay.
hearing about the open space requirement,
Okay.
that was considered. I think another element, and I am gonna be very site specific, or not site specific, but site development specific, that 15% of your 10 acres
Mhm.
would potentially be dedicated to a right-of-way for road, for utilities. So if we were looking at 10 acres,
Mhm.
you could have a permissible number of units based upon this square
So
footage.
that would be 52 units.
So we need to take off 1.5, in my example,
Mhm.
acres associated, at a minimum.
Mhm.
Let's just say your designer is really efficient,
Mhm.
probably somewhere in the vicinity of 1.5 acres of that are coming off for infrastructure. So there can't be houses built upon that. And
Right.
so we have 8.5 acres left.
Mhm.
I'm going to ask just in general, if your property is completely flat, or it could have some sort of association of like what net buildable area needs to be put aside,
Right.
and sort of how that's slated in. So in the 8.5 acres that we came up with, we need, I believe 2.5 acres of that need to be dedicated to open, if it's 25%, what that may be.
Okay.
So now I'm down to 6 acres, or ish, right?
Mhm.
So of those 52 units that are calculated, I only have 6 acres in my
Mhm.
calculation. That does not mean that I get to squish.
Well, that's just my
Okay.
question. That's what I
And-
want to know.
And so, I'm glad you're asking this, because in this calculation set of what this amendment does, you would be required to fulfill the 8,500 square feet per lot, and you can do that on your 6 acres.
Mhm.
This is very, and only single-family dwellings.
Right, right.
This is very different than an earlier version of PRD for R2 that was in the ordinance and was removed by ordinance 712, which would have otherwise permitted those 52 units in various land use dwelling forms,
Mhm.
to happen within that 6 acres.
Okay.
So I think there
So this is a good thing.
I think it is something where the board and the planning commission and all of the comments that have been received as part of a number of things in this year
Mhm.
have tried to take into consideration.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. That
Thank you.
clarifies it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask one question to just explain the R1 district,
Was that?
the deletion of?
Sir, you're gonna have to come up here.
What's that?
You're gonna have to come up here.
Could you give us your name, please?
Came late, so I missed some of this. The removal,
I'm sorry, sir, could
What
you
is
state
your
your
name?
name for the record, please?
Bruce Shiring. And I was just questioning, or just explain to me the R1 district terminology that you're, I guess, deletion of the statement in the R1 for the 30 acres required.
There, in the current PRD chapter within the code, R1 is permissible to host a PRD application.
Yeah,
The-
which always confuses me, this PRD stuff.
The amendment is proposing in its sort of entire references to PRD being allowed in R1 anywhere where that happens in the ordinance, it happens a couple of different places.
Okay.
One of the ones that you read is there's a minimum acreage if a PRD wants to be proposed in R1. This amendment is saying that no more PRDs could occur in R1.
Okay.
Given that, we need to delete sentences within different parts of the ordinance that make the reference that PRDs
I see.
exist.
Okay.
So that's an example.
I see.
And
Okay.
other ones, further down the amendment where we just said in entirety, because the only sentence in that section is all about R1, we're just deleting the whole section.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I don't know if this is the place to bring this up. My neighbor came up to me this week in a state of panic. And he had on his phone that they're proposing to put a gas well behind the school on Stewart.
I'm not
And I
familiar,
said,
or
Joe,
is that part of this?
I never
don't
heard
know.
of anything about it.
That's something I think is part of other discussion.
The
Yeah.
ordinance right now with regard to gas wells doesn't permit a structure or anything, compressor station, anything like
Okay.
that. It only permits horizontal drilling.
That's what I understood.
Gas wells are permitted, but only in one distinct area of the township, not behind a school.
Okay. Thank you. We can all go home.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carolyn.
Appreciate the time and the questions. Thank you.
Right? I'd like to just ask a couple of.
One more.
Paul Smith again, and I apologize for not asking earlier. None of these changes are tied to any changes in the existing zoning boundaries of the various districts throughout the township, are they?
What's proposed is a text.
You're asking if there's a map change of any kind?
Map change of any
This is
kind.
all a text amendment and has been as it's been advertised following the authorization of what the board had in September.
Has the board authorized any examination of map changes?
That has not been part of any of this discussion or what we were
A
given.
map change requires an ordinance change as well.
Right, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Nobody has anything else here then? We can proceed. Okay.
I was gonna wait to ask till next month, but why not now, cause spring's coming. Not as serious
Well, what
as
is your
everything-
name, please?
Oh, Sarah Thor, 3615 Downing. I was here last fall to talk about chickens, and just touching base, that's all.
Well, we had someone bring up chickens last month as well,
Okay.
and it's something we will take a look at.
All right, I know you guys said you were looking into it, but I've been out of town, so I wanna check in.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Specifically, you're talking about the hobby farm.
Yeah,
ordinance. Okay.
amending it to just allow backyard pet chickens, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Action on the minutes. Motion is needed to approve, table, reject the minutes of the regular meeting held on December the 11th, 2023. Motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 5, a motion is needed to approve, table, reject the minutes of the reorganization meeting held on January the 2nd, 2024. Motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the reorganization meeting.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 6, a motion is needed to approve, table, reject the payment of invoices for the month of December 2023.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Action on ordinance number 715, an ordinance amending the Township of South Park, County of Allegheny, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, ordinance number 556, zoning ordinance, as amended Article 2, definitions Article 4, R1, low-density single-family residential districts, Article 5, R2, medium-density single-family residential districts, Article 7, R4, multifamily residential district and to amend Article 18, planned residential development, PRD, to maintain consistency with said updates. Motion is needed to approve, table, and reject. Motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to say, thank you guys all for coming here for this. Before we vote on this, I do want you to know that we've looked at this for quite some time. We've taken your consideration. We've had hearings. The board, I believe, is trying to do the right thing. I hope Carolyn was able to answer everybody's questions sufficiently. I know that this is very detail-oriented. So again, thank you guys for coming. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 715.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Action on ordinance number 716, an ordinance of the Township of South Park, Allegheny County, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, accepting certain improvements in the Summit Station Phase 1 subdivision plan as public improvements of the Township of South Park. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject ordinance number 716.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 9, action on 2024 junkyard license, Lewis Payne Jr. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject the application of Lewis Payne Jr., representing Advanced Auto Recyclers Incorporated, 3100 Ridgeway Drive, for a 2024 junkyard license.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 10, action on release of bond, Summit Station Phase 1. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject the reduction of the performance bond request submitted by developer T&R Properties for the project identified as the Summit Station Phase 1 plan as follows. Cash bond, $451,512.60. Reduction of $41,046.60. Remaining balance is $410,466. And if approving, allowing the remaining balance in the amount of $410,466 to serve as a required 18-month maintenance bond as recommended by the Township Engineer.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Action to ratify the insurance proposal, American Public Risk, LLC, AmGuard Insurance Company. A motion is needed to ratify the insurance proposal submitted by General Managing Agent, American Public Risk, on behalf of AmGuard Insurance Company to provide insurance coverage to South Park Township for the calendar year 2024, including but not limited to the following: A, property; B, boiler and machinery; C, inland marine; D, crime; E, general liability; F, employee benefits liability; G, public officials liability; H, employment practice liability; I, law enforcement liability; J, automobile liability; K, umbrella; L, terrorism cyber liability, at a premium of $120,112.
Motion to ratify.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 12, action to ratify 2024 workers' compensation insurance proposal, AmTrust Insurance Company. A motion is needed to ratify the insurance proposal submitted by AmTrust Insurance Company, which outlines the terms and conditions for the provisions of workmen's compensation insurance to South Park Township for the period January 1st, 2024 till January 1st of 2025 at a premium cost of $107,371.
Motion to ratify.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 13, action on resolution number 1-24, a resolution of the Township of South Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, declaring its intent to follow the schedules and procedures for the disposition of records as set forth in the Municipal Records Manual approved on December 16th of 2008, as amended March 28th of 2019. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject resolution number 1-24.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 14, action on resignation, police officer Luke Lloyd. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject the resignation of Officer Luke Lloyd from his position as a junior patrolman in the South Park Township Police Department, with an effective date being January 14th of 2024 at the close of the business day.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 15, action on resolution number 2-24, a resolution of the Township of South Park, Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, adopted pursuant to the ordinance number 295 of the Township of South Park, known as the Personnel Code of the Township of South Park, setting the compensation and benefits of the Board of Supervisors and auditors and the compensation ranges and benefits of certain full-time administrative personnel and certain other personnel. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject resolution number 2-24.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 16, action on payment request number 2, Route 88 and Brownsville Road intersection project, gem demolition. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject payment number 2 in the amount of $87,562.50 as submitted by the contractor Gem Demolition for the demolition work completed to date on Route 88 and Brownsville Road intersection project, and if approving, as recommended by the project engineer.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
17, action to authorize attendance of Recreation Director Devin Serena, 2024 PA Recreation and Park Society. A motion is needed to approve, table, reject the attendance of Recreation Director Devin Serena to the annual PA Recreation and Park Society, PRPS, Conference and Expo, which will be held March 12, 2024 to March 15, 2024 at a cost of $400 for the registration fee.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, MS4 report. Ms. Foswell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the MS4 report for December, which is dated January 8th, 2023. MS4 is the acronym for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System. It's a short report this month. Number 1, the part-time litter collection employee continued on with litter collection activities on township streets to prevent trash from impacting the function of the stormwater inlets. Number 2, the Public Works Department raised 2 sanitary sewer manholes in December. However, no catch basins were rebuilt because of the weather. Number 3, the Public Works Department continued to remove leaves from stormwater inlets to ensure functionality. Number 4, the bid opening for the 2024 Township-wide sanitary sewer project will be held on February 7th, 2024. And number 5, the Public Works Department continues to inspect outfalls in December. This is an ongoing process. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Action is needed to approve, table, reject the MS4 report for the month of December 2023.
Need a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Number 19, action to establish the 2024 IRS reimbursement rate for mileage. A motion is needed to establish the IRS rate of mileage reimbursement at 67 cents per mile in 2024.
A motion to establish IRS rate for mileage.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Police Chief's report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This will be for police department activities for December of 2023 and also our annual report for 2023. December 2023 calls for service 575 calls, 5 arrests, 21 traffic citations, 40 warning citations, 2 reportable crashes, 7 non-reportable crashes, 8 fire calls, 88 emergency medical calls and 2 deer struck by vehicles in the month of December. For all of 2023, the department responded to 7,242 calls for service, 78 arrests, 361 traffic citations, 843 warning citations, 28 reportable crashes, 71 non-reportable crashes, 107 fire calls, 888 emergency calls, emergency medical calls, and 32 deer struck by vehicles. That's all we have.
Thank you, Chief. Motion is needed to accept the police chief's report.
Motion to accept police chief's report.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Supervisors' comments, Mr. Lucat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I said earlier, thank you guys for coming here and taking the time to address the matters on the agenda tonight, to bring certain things to the supervisors and the township officials' attention. We do appreciate your comments, your input, and thank you again. I'd also like to thank Public Works. They had their first snow test this Saturday. You guys did great. I saw the plows out within the hour when it started, so good job this Saturday. Keep up the good work. Hopefully we don't have too much snow this winter, but good work over the weekend. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vogel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree. It's nice to see everybody out here tonight. And I also noticed that I applaud your comments, sir, as well as bringing your family. I'm assuming your family. It goes without saying, let's say next month, we're very fortunate in this country to have our rights and things of that nature. It's also great, though it may not be as exciting as what's on TV, to come to these things and see how government works for us. So appreciate you, sir.
Okay, thank you all for coming for our first monthly meeting. We wish we would have the same attendance every month, but please feel free to let us know if something's going on in your neighborhood. Again, I thank the road crew for excellent service for snowfall. Chief, thank you for the cars upside down doing the roads and closing roads this week. You've had a real job there.
It's been a rough week.
So thank you again. Thank you all for coming.
And hail the pit.
Adjourn.
And make adjournment.
That's what I'd say.
Motion to adjourn.
8:26.
Here's the second.
26.
Hey Tom, John Haynes, sir. How are you?
All in favor?
How are you? Sorry, I'm sitting down there.
So we want to stick around.
We got one down.
Yeah.
Sure.
You're halfway there.
I have the answer.
We're coming out on
You
Thursday.
What's
We're
that?
going to walk phase 2 with Gateway and GAI in Jackson academics.
Okay, right?
So we're all going to walk it, go through the punch list. GAI is going out Wednesday to finish up their as-was, just a few more things.
You know.